are here the night after WNBA Fight Night. Sophie Cunningham putting JC Sheldon in a clinch. Marina Mabrey targeting Caitlin Clark.
All they had to do was just eject her. All they had to do was eject her, and none of this happens. If the referees had ejected Marina Mabrey, nothing else happens. The Sophie Cunningham situation does not happen. So, like, there are 4 players fined in that game. 4 players fined in that game, but the referees, the scariest part about all this is that the referees came out with their report. They came out with their report and said, the contact made by Mabrey did not rise to the level of ejection. Additionally, it did not meet the criteria for a flagrant 2 penalty. And it was given as a technical foul. Not even a flagrant, by the way.
A lot of it is centered around the last 46 seconds where Sophie Cunningham hard fouls JC Sheldon. She gets ejected, JC gets ejected, does Lindsay? I think Lindsay gets ejected. And you know, in watching the broadcast, even the broadcasters at the time mentioned if they would have just ejected Marina Mabrey, this probably wouldn't have happened.
Okay, gather round, because we need to talk about what's been happening in the WNBA. Imagine you're at the most incredible, hyped-up party, the kind everyone's been waiting for. The music's perfect, the energy's electric, and it feels like the start of something truly special. But then, imagine the lights start to flicker, not because of some random power surge, but because it feels like someone inside the house keeps tripping over the main breaker again and again. That's pretty much the vibe coming off the WNBA. Recently, here's a league that's finally, deservedly, shining brighter than ever, capturing new fans, breaking records, and then, bam, it stumbles, not over an external obstacle, but seemingly over its own feet, especially during moments when all eyes are on it. One particular sequence of events, a flashpoint in a game that was already simmering with tension, didn't just cause a momentary outage. It sent genuine shockwaves through the entire fanbase and had everyone, from casual viewers to seasoned analysts, asking a really uncomfortable question: is the WNBA truly ready for the revolution it's so clearly experiencing the stage for? This particular drama was a matchup between the Connecticut Sun and the Indiana Fever. Now, any game involving the Fever this season comes with an extra layer of anticipation, largely thanks to the arrival of Caitlin Clark, a rookie who has single-handedly recalibrated the league's popularity metrics. New eyes, sell-out crowds, record viewership, this is the new normal. But this game, it had an edge to it from the get-go, a crackling tension that felt like it was just waiting for a spark. It was less a smooth basketball exhibition and more like what some were calling WNBA Fight Night, a powder keg of emotions, hard fouls, and escalating tempers that ultimately saw 6 technicals, 3 ejections, and 2 flagrant fouls. It was pure, unadulterated chaos, and while that can sometimes be thrilling, this felt different. This felt like a system under immense pressure, starting to fray at the seams. And then it happened, the moment that would ignite a firestorm. We're talking about a play that, on its surface, was brutally simple and, to many, shockingly blatant. Caitlin Clark, the rookie phenom who has become the face of this new WNBA wave, was moving away from the ball, completely unsuspecting, not involved in the immediate action. In that split second, Connecticut Sun guard Marina Mabrey, a player known for her aggressive style, appeared to see an opportunity. She lowered her shoulder, planted her feet, and delivered a jarring blindside shove. Clark, unprepared for the contact, went crashing to the hardwood. You could almost hear the collective gasp, not just from the crowd in the arena, but from everyone watching at home. The broadcast crew even seemed momentarily stunned into silence. It was the kind of play that makes you wince. A whistle blew almost immediately. The contact was clear, it was off-ball, and it looked, to many, like a deliberate act of non-basketball aggression, the kind of thing that, more often than not in professional basketball, results in a flagrant foul and an automatic ejection. That's the expectation when a play crosses that line from physical basketball to what appears to be an intentional cheap shot. The referees convened, the replay was likely examined, and everyone waited for what seemed like an obvious call. The anticipation hung heavy. This wasn't just any player. This was Caitlin Clark, the player bringing those millions of new eyes to the league. The handling of this moment felt significant, but when the referees finally announced their decision, It landed with a thud of utter bafflement. Just a simple technical foul, no flagrant foul, no ejection. Mabrey was allowed to stay in the game. A thick cloud of confusion and disbelief settled over the arena and across social media. This wasn't a bang-bang play in the heat of a rebound battle, or a defender making a hard, albeit clumsy, attempt on the ball. This was an off-ball shove to an unsuspecting player. Yet, the officials on the court, in that moment, treated it like a relatively minor, run-of-the-mill infraction. That single, inexplicable decision, that puzzling interpretation of a very clear event, would become the anchor for all the chaos and controversy that was about to unfold, leaving fans and analysts alike scratching their heads and asking a very simple, very direct question. What on earth are the refs watching, and why did this feel so wrong? The uneasy feeling that something was deeply and fundamentally amiss with the officiating that night didn't just linger as a hypothetical question for long. It crystallized into what felt like undeniable fact just a short while later in a completely separate incident that provided a stark and, for many, infuriating contrast. Phoenix Mercury player Sophie Cunningham, in a different game, but part of this overarching, chaotic night the original commentary referenced, was whistled for a hard foul on JCS Sheldon of the Dallas Wings as Sheldon drove to the basket. Cunningham got tangled up with her, wrapping her up in a clinch, seemingly to prevent an easy score. It was unquestionably physical, a strong defensive move, but it was also a recognizable basketball play, a defender trying to stop an opponent from scoring at the rim. It wasn't off-ball, it wasn't a blindside. The referees, however, reviewed this play, and to the absolute astonishment of many who were already reeling from the Mabrey decision, saw something far more sinister, or at least something worthy of a far more severe penalty. They hit Cunningham with a flagrant to foul, ejecting her from the game on the spot. The contrast between this call and the Mabrey call was staggering. So, let's get this straight. Mabrey delivers a calculated, off-ball blindside shove to an unsuspecting Clark and gets a technical, stays in the game. Cunningham engages in a physical, on-ball defensive play, albeit a hard one, and gets an immediate flagrant to end an ejection. The double standard wasn't just whispered about, it was shouted from the digital rooftops. The inconsistency was so glaring it felt almost intentional to frustrated fans. Social media absolutely exploded. Clips of the Mabrey shove were played side by side with the Cunningham foul, accompanied by furious demands for an explanation. How could one act, which appeared far more dangerous and less related to actual basketball, be met with a relative slap on theorist, while the other, a more conventional if overly aggressive defensive play, warrant an instant ejection? It wasn't about debating a close call anymore. This felt like the entire framework of fair play and consistent rule application had been tossed out the window. It gave the impression that the referees weren't just making calls. They were making it up as they went along, and they're bizarre. Arbitrary judgments were turning what should have been competitive basketball games into frustrating farces. The credibility of the officiating was taking a massive hit, live and in real time. Then, after the final buzzer had sounded on the Sun Fever game and the online outrage had reached a deafening, undeniable roar, the WNBA's head office was clearly forced to intervene. In a move that is relatively rare and incredibly telling, the league issued a formal announcement. They were retroactively upgrading Marina Mabrey's in-game technical foul to a flagrant to penalty. This was, in no uncertain terms, a massive public admission of failure by the league regarding its on-court officials. A flagrant to foul, by rule, comes with an automatic ejection. So, the league was now officially and publicly stating that its referees had made a significant, game-altering mistake. Mabrey should have been thrown out of the game the moment she committed that foul on Clark, while this decision from the league office was presumably intended to quell the storm, to deliver a sense of delayed justice, and perhaps to show fans that their concerns were heard. It had a somewhat opposite effect for many. Instead of calming the waters, it only further confirmed what every fan watching the game already knew in their gut. The referees had completely, utterly blown the call in a critical moment involving the league's brightest new star, the post-game. Correction, while technically correcting the error, felt less like a genuine commitment to fairness and more like panic damage control in the face of overwhelming public pressure and potential brand damage the league had tried to put out the fire, but in doing so, it inadvertently poured gasoline on the burning credibility of its own officials. It fixed one problem, the missed call on Mabrey, but in the process, it created a new, arguably much deeper one, a crisis of confidence in the people tasked with enforcing the rules on the court. The plot thickened considerably when the official poll report from the game was released to the media. This is where things went from a bad call to a truly bizarre internal conflict. In that report, the lead referee, Ashley Gloss, provided her direct explanation for the on-court decision. Regarding the Mabrey shove, she stated in no uncertain terms that the contact from Mabrey did not rise to the level of an ejection and did not meet the criteria for a flagrant penalty. According to her and her crew on the floor, they had reviewed the play and deemed it not serious enough for removal from the game. They saw it, they analyzed it, and they concluded just a technical dot. Then, just hours later, the WNBA League Office released its own statement, the one upgrading the foul to a flagrant 2, effectively shredding the judgment of its own on-court officials. The public contradiction was stunning. How could the trained professionals on the court, the ones with the whistles and the instant replay monitors, watch the exact same blatant shove and arrive at a conclusion so diametrically opposed to that of the rule makers and executives in the league office? It painted a damning picture of a system in apparent disarray. Were the rules themselves fundamentally unclear? Were they open to such wildly different interpretations? Or, more worrisomely, were the referees simply incompetent at applying them, especially under the bright lights of a high-profile game? This public disagreement wasn't just a minor dispute. It exposed a chasm of confidence and competence at the very heart of the league. No one seemed to be on the same page, and it left everyone wondering who, if anyone, was actually in charge of the rulebook and its consistent application, while the league and its referees were entangled in this very public and very awkward dispute. Over rules and regulations, the player at the absolute center of the initial controversial act, Marina Mabrey, wasn't just unfazed by the uproar, she was, in her own way, actively cashing in on it. Mabrey has meticulously built her entire on-court persona and career on a foundation of aggressive, in-your-face physicality. She is known for being a pot stirrer and agitator, the kind of player that fans in opposing arenas absolutely love to boo. It's a reputation she not only accepts, but seems to wear like a badge of honor, something she leans into. So, when the controversy around her shove of Caitlin Clark exploded across sports media and social media platforms, she didn't issue an apology. She didn't lay low and wait for the storm to pass. And she certainly didn't show even a hint of regret for her actions or the subsequent fallout. Instead, she leaned directly into the storm. In a TikTok video responding to the flood of angry, critical, and sometimes hateful comments she was receiving, she posted a simple, defiant, and incredibly telling message: "Every time they comment, I make dollars." With that one sentence, she completely flipped the narrative from her perspective. She was turning the outrage into fuel, unapologetically embracing the role of the villain, and making it perfectly clear that she thrives on the chaos. For Mabrey, this wasn't about sportsmanship or the integrity of the game in that moment. It was about building her brand in the modern digital age, where notoriety often equals engagement, and engagement, as she pointed out, can equal money. Her brazen, unapologetic stance only further polarized the already heated debate and, more importantly, raised an even bigger, more troubling question for the league itself. What are you supposed to do when a player can ignite a massive firestorm, face a relatively minor post-game penalty of fine, but no suspension, and then walk away not only unscathed, but openly celebrating the controversy and its personal benefits? It highlighted a challenging dynamic in modern sports, where individual branding can sometimes seem to clash with collective league image. This entire fiasco, from the initial shove to the conflicting statements and Mabrey's defiant response, is magnified tenfold, perhaps even 100-fold, by one unavoidable, game-changing reality: the Caitlin Clark effect. The WNBA is currently experiencing a meteoric surge in popularity, a genuine phenomenon unlike anything in its nearly 3-decade history. And it's no secret that this explosion in interest is almost entirely attributable to its new #1 draft pick and bona fide superstar, Caitlin Clark. Games are selling out in record time, not just home games, but road games too, national. Television viewership is shattering previous records, week after week. The league is finally, consistently, getting the kind of mainstream media attention and cultural relevance it has fought tirelessly for decades to earn. It's a golden era. Daunting? But with that bright, often unforgiving, international spotlight comes immense, unprecedented pressure. Every hard foul against Clark, every physical interaction, every slightly controversial moment involving her is now dissected frame by frame, not just by dedicated WNBA fans, but by millions of new viewers, many of whom are still learning the nuances of the league, its players, and its style of play. The narrative that Clark is being welcomed to the league with excessive physicality, or even worse, that she is being intentionally targeted by opponents, is growing louder and more persistent with each passing game and each hard knock she takes. The Mabrey shove wasn't just another missed call in a random game. It was a missed call on a blatant foul against the league's single most valuable asset, broadcast live to a massive, newly engaged audience. The stakes are simply higher. Now, the officials, therefore, aren't just calling a basketball game anymore when Clark is on the court. Whether they consciously acknowledge it or not, they are also acting as on-court stewards of a rapidly growing, multi-million-dollar brand. Their failure to adequately protect a player in such a vulnerable, off-ball position, especially a player so central to the league's present and future prosperity, sends a terrible message. It suggests, at best, that the WNBA's officiating isn't quite ready for this new level of primetime scrutiny. At worst, it hints that the league can't, or perhaps won't, consistently protect its own stars when it matters most, particularly the one driving so much of this new success. This incident wasn't just about rules. It was about optics, trust, and the perception of competence on a global stage. And the perception, after that sequence, was far from flattering. Disturbingly, this whole mess with the Mabrey shove and the subsequent officiating controversy wasn't some isolated black swan event. For those who have been paying close attention, it felt like a deeply unsettling case of history repeating itself, almost beat for beat. Cast your mind back to just the previous season, or even earlier in Clark's rookie campaign, a nearly identical firestorm erupted when then Chicago's Sky player Kennedy Carter delivered a vicious, off-ball hip check to Caitlin Clark. It was another moment that went viral for all the wrong reasons. In that instance, just like with the initial call on the Mabrey play, the referees on the court completely missed it. No foul was called on the floor during the game. Carter continued playing. It was only after a massive tidal wave of social media outrage, with clips of the hit being shared millions of times and prominent sports commentators weighing in, that the WNBA league office stepped in a day late and, many would argue, $1 short to retroactively upgrade the play to a flagrant 1 foul. The parallels between the Carter incident and the Mabrey incident are genuinely chilling. In both cases, a blatant, non-basketball cheap shot delivered to Clark while she was away from the ball. In both cases, a complete failure by the on-court officials to recognize and appropriately penalize the dangerous action in real time. In both cases, a massive public outcry from fans, new and old, who saw the fouls for exactly what they were, unsportsmanlike and dangerous. And in both cases, a belated, reactive correction from the league office, trying to clean up a mess that, frankly, should never have been allowed to fester in the first place. This is no longer about a single bad call, or a single inexperienced crew, or one player getting away with something. When you see the same pattern repeat itself, it starts to reveal a systemic breakdown. It suggests a worrying trend where the league is constantly playing catch-up to its own controversies, seemingly unable to get it right in the heat of the moment when it truly counts. This recurring cycle of on-court miss, public outrage, and delayed league intervention does profound damage. It erodes trust in the referees, trust in the league's ability to manage its games fairly, and trust in its commitment to player safety, especially for its marquee attractions. It makes the league look perpetually disorganized, reactive rather than proactive, and always one step behind its own rapidly evolving game. And for a league trying to solidify its place in the major sports landscape, that's a dangerous image to project. There's a narrative being floated by some, perhaps those trying to find a silver lining or excuse the recurring chaos that all this. The bad calls, the intense player rivalries boiling over, the media frenzies, the officiating inconsistencies is merely the growing pains of a league in a rapid state of transition. The WNBA is expanding, its audience is booming, and naturally, there will be bumps in the road. That's a comforting thought. But there's a deepening, more cynical fear bubbling just beneath the surface that these aren't just temporary pains. That will heal with time. They might be symptoms of a more systemic breakdown, a sign of deeper, more troubling issues within the league's operational and cultural fabric. The WNBA seems caught in a peculiar and challenging culture clash. On one hand, it's trying to honor its old school, gritty, tough-nosed identity, a league built on resilience and fierce competition. On the other, it's desperately trying to merge with and capitalize on the polished, high-scrutiny, star-driven world of modern, mainstream sports entertainment. This awkward fusion has, at times, created a bizarre hypocrisy. Plays that might have been considered just tough defense or part of the physicality of the game just 1 or 2 seasons ago are now igniting national debates and social media firestorms, largely because the new, amplified spotlight, often centered on specific star players, changes the entire context. The league, it seems, desperately wants the money, the primetime attention, and the cultural relevance that a transcendent superstar like Caitlin Clark brings. That's undeniable, but it often appears utterly unprepared, or perhaps unwilling, to fully manage the complex, high-stakes environment that inevitably comes with that level of stardom and scrutiny. The central question, therefore, is no longer just about one missed foul, one controversial ejection, or even one poorly handled game. It's evolving into a much larger question about the league's very foundation and its capacity to adapt. Can the WNBA professionalize its officiating to a level commensurate with its newfound popularity? Can it enforce its own rules consistently and transparently, especially when it comes to player safety and the conduct of its athletes, both on and off the court? And can it do this fast enough to keep pace with its own explosive, almost runaway, growth? Or will these internal conflicts, these glaring double standards, these seemingly endless cycles of reactive punishments and public relations crises ultimately sabotage its own golden opportunity? There's a real danger that these persistent issues could alienate the very fans, both the loyal longtimers and the curious newcomers, that it's working so hard to attract and retain. So, what was the final box score on this particular controversy? A chaotic mess of fines, conflicting official statements, and a whole host of lingering questions that, for many, still don't have satisfying answers. Marina Mabrey's technical foul was upgraded to a Flagrant 2, and she received a fine. Sophie Cunningham, in that other incident, was also fined on top of her ejection. But the resolution felt procedural, not reassuring. The Mabrey shove on Clark may have been the initial flashpoint, the single act that lit the fuse, but the entire incident and the way it was handled from start to finish did far more than just adjudicate one foul. It exposed a system where the rules can feel frustratingly arbitrary, where consistency seems elusive, and where fairness, at times, appears to be an afterthought, secondary to managing public perception after the fact, when the league itself and its own on-court officials can't even agree on what constitutes a dangerous play worthy of ejection. Watching the same video, presumably with the same rulebook in hand, it's crystal clear that something is fundamentally broken. This is no longer just about one game, or one bad call, or even protecting one specific star player, as important as she is. This is about the future integrity and credibility of a league that is standing, right now, on the absolute cusp of unprecedented greatness. The WNBA has been handed a golden opportunity, a chance to truly break through into the mainstream sports consciousness in a sustainable way, largely thanks to the wave of excitement Clark and other young stars are generating. But that opportunity, as bright as it seems, is also incredibly fragile if fans, both the new ones tuning in out of curiosity and the dedicated ones who have supported the league for years, come to believe that the games are poorly officiated, that star players aren't adequately protected, or that the outcomes can be unduly influenced by incompetent or inconsistent calls, they will simply tune out. They'll find something else to watch, some other league that feels more reliable, more professional, more fair. The real, pressing question that hangs in the air after all of this is a troubling one: will the WNBA learn from this debacle, and the ones before it, and truly commit to enforcing its rules consistently, proactively, and transparently in the moment when it matters? Or will it continue to chase its own tail, constantly trying to clean up messes that, with better systems and clearer standards, never should have happened in the first place? The future of this exciting new chapter for the league might just depend on the answer. What do you think about all this? Was the league's response to the Mabrey incident too little, too late? Are these just growing pains, or a sign of deeper issues with WNBA officiating and consistency? I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below. And hey, if you found this breakdown interesting or it got you thinking, do me a solid and hit that like button, and definitely subscribe for more deep dives into the stories shaping the sports world. We've got plenty more to talk about.